DMHK, the World News Tonight with Matt Waldron.
Good evening, I'm Matt Waldron. Here are the headlines. Samoa tsunami toll may exceed 100. HK-born businessman jailed for US fraud. US talks with Cuba revealed. And many killed in Nepal church collapse. A series of tsunamis smashed into the Pacific island nations of American and Western Samoa, killing possibly more than 100 people, destroying villages and injuring hundreds. US President Barack Obama declared American Samoa, US territory, a major disaster and ordered federal aid to help recovery efforts, with a C-130 military transport aircraft due to leave Honolulu for the tiny South Pacific island. New Zealand's government said there were serious concerns about the neighbouring island nation of Tonga after a 4-metre wave hit its northern coast. Tongan officials said they feared 5 people had been killed. A Pacific-wide tsunami warning was issued after an 8.0 magnitude undersea quake off American Samoa, with reports of a small tsunami reaching New Zealand and rising sea levels in several South Pacific island nations. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Centre cancelled its Pacific-wide warning, but Japan's meteorological agency issued a local tsunami warning for its east coast, warning of a possible small tsunami. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Centre later issued an advisory that small tsunami waves had reached Hawaii, warning the waves could be dangerous to swimmers and boats. The powerful typhoon that has hit the Philippines and Vietnam with deadly force is now battering Cambodia, killing at least 9 people. When Typhoon Katsana hit Vietnam, more than 30 people were killed and almost 200,000 people fled their homes. In the Philippines, where the typhoon hit over the weekend, at least 246 people are known to have died. A Chinese-American businessman and fundraiser for the Democratic Party has been sentenced to 24 years prison for fraud by a court in New York. Hong Kong-born Norman Su, 58, was convicted on charges of operating an $80 million pyramid fraud or Ponzi scheme and violating campaign finance laws. Mr. Su's scam was to attract investments to his 2 companies, Components Limited and Next Components Limited, with promises of guaranteed short-term high returns. In reality, the returns were cash stolen from new investors. He became a supporter of Democratic causes, including the presidential campaigns of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, to boost his standing and ability to attract further investors, prosecutors say. Su's dishonest use of political campaigns to perpetrate his fraud strikes at the very core of our democracy, Judge Victor Marrero said. Su betrayed the trust of his victims by stealing their money and with false promises of fake returns in order to finance a luxurious lifestyle, said prosecutor Preet Bharara. He broke federal campaign finance laws to pump up his public profile and bolster his victims' belief in his phony investment program. Today's sentence underscores our commitment to stop swindlers. Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Obama last year returned all donations linked to Mr. Su and gave them to charity. The South African President, Jacob Zuma, has voiced support for a planned law allowing police officers to open fire on armed criminals without having to wait for them to shoot first. Addressing the commanders of more than 1,000 police stations, Mr. Zuma said police officers must never be trigger-happy, but they had to defend themselves and the public. 2 days before multi-party talks in Geneva, Iran has said it won't discuss what it calls its nuclear rights. The Iranians are due to meet representatives from the UN Nuclear Agency, the IAEA, and the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, plus Germany. Reports from Saudi Arabia say 20 youths have been given 30 lashes each for taking part in street disturbances during National Day last week. It's reported that the youths received their punishment in public. The disturbances took place in the east of the country as King Abdullah opened a new university devoted to science and technology by the Red Sea. Police in Nepal say a church has collapsed in the east of the country, killing at least 26 people. More than 60 others are injured. Reports say many people had gathered in the town of Dharan for a Christian conference and some were spending the night in the church. It's emerged in Washington that a senior American official extended her visit to Cuba earlier this month and held previously unannounced talks with Cuban officials. The State Department diplomat, Biza Williams, travelled to Cuba for negotiations on the restoration of direct postal links. The African Union has denounced the actions of security forces at an opposition rally in the Guinean capital, Conakry, which opposition leaders and human rights activists say left over 100 people dead. The AU said it strongly condemned the indiscriminate firing on unarmed civilians and other serious human rights violations. Philippine authorities are bracing for another storm as the death toll from last weekend's typhoon rose to 246. Weather forecasters said a new storm forming in the Pacific Ocean was likely to enter Philippine waters on Thursday and make landfall later in the week on the northern island of Luzon, just like Saturday's typhoon Kitsana. Kitsana dumped more than a month's worth of average rainfall on Manila and surrounding areas in one 24-hour period. The Philippine government has come in for scathing criticism for its response to the disaster, with many calling it inadequate and delayed. Authorities estimate damage from the storm so far at nearly US $100 million. More than 1.9 million people were affected, and 375,000 have abandoned their homes and taken refuge in evacuation centres. The death toll could rise further once reports come in from remote areas. Dozens remain missing and feared dead, disaster officials said. And finally tonight, the Indian Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh, says a massive increase in nuclear power generation over the next 4 decades would help India to reduce its impact on global warming. Speaking at an international conference in Delhi, he suggested that in future, nearly 500,000 megawatts of energy could come from the country's nuclear power stations. Correspondents say more than half of India's electricity is generated at coal-fired power plants, and that dependence on coal will increase as its energy demands grow. That's it. The late news is at 10:30. Goodbye.